Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Town Hall on Environmental Justice. We're going to get started in just a moment. Before we do so, I would just like to give some quick instructions on how to use Zoom. If you are joining from your computer, these top instructions are for you. You can select your speakers using the audio settings button. We'd love to hear from you throughout the event. So you can leave us a chat, which is on the bottom of the screen for you, this chat button. If you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand. If you would like to ask a question, there's a Q&A function here. And if you would like to if you like interpretation, we have interpretation available in Spanish, in Mandarin, and in Cantonese tonight. If possible, I'd like to have my interpreters please introduce themselves. First, our interpreters, Mei Ling and Susanna in Mandarin. Okay, we may be having a issue with our interpretation. Just ask if it's possible for our Spanish interpreters, Marian and Patty, to say hello and introduce themselves. Oh, okay. Our interpreters are actually already in the interpretation room. So if you need interpretation, you would push this button here, interpretation, and select your language. If you're joining from your smartphone or mobile phone, you can still raise your hand. You can still chat us or send us a question. If you need interpretation and you're on your mobile device, you select the More button, language interpretation, and then choose your language. If you are joining from a landline or a phone, you are able to raise your hand by pushing *9. And you are able to access the audio by pushing *6. We have a packed agenda for you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. To kick us off, we're going to go over to Peggy Shepard.
So good evening. Welcome, everyone. We're here today to talk about the city's environmental justice laws and to discuss the ways in which you can be involved in developing the first Environmental Justice for All report. But first, let's talk about what is environmental justice. Now, environmental justice means the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all persons, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, policies, and activities, and with respect to the distribution of environmental benefits. Now, environmental justice works to address environmental racism by ensuring access and inclusion for people at every level of the planning and decision-making process and equal protection from environmental and health hazards. Now, this also includes implementing policies designed to close the gap on these environmental health disparities. Now, climate justice, that is the recognition that it is these same historically overburdened communities that are most vulnerable to a rapidly changing climate. Disparities that are persistent in our society, from social to economic and health inequities, they can be exacerbated by impacts of climate change like extreme heat, flooding, and catastrophic weather events. The pursuit of climate justice also means holding those with the most responsibility for the climate crisis, holding them accountable. Next slide. So let's talk about the Environmental Justice Program. Next. In 2017, New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio signed Local Law 60 and Local Law 64 to codify environmental justice into city decision-making. 10 years of advocacy went into developing those laws. And the Environmental Justice Program, as a result, is centered on three main products, which include the delivery of a report, a map, and a plan. We have a diverse team of professionals responsible for implementing these laws, many of which are here today. So I'm joined by several members of the Environmental Justice Advisory Board, and I'd like them to introduce themselves right now if they can. So why don't we start? I see Omar.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. My name is Omar Freya. I am Executive Director of Green Worker Cooperatives, working on helping to make sure that businesses are green and worker-owned and our businesses are doing well by our communities. So I've been doing environmental justice, organizing work for a very, very, very long time, longer than I look.
Diana.
Hi, Diana Hernandez. I'm a professor of public health at Columbia University. I'm also a resident of the South Bronx. Happy to be here.
Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Bratspies. I'm a professor at CUNY School of Law, and I'm the director of the Center for Urban Environmental Reform. Proud Queens residents here, and I'm proud to be here with all of you tonight.
Thank you. Christine.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christine Appa, and I'm a senior staff attorney in the Environmental Justice Program at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest.
Thank you. Anthu.
Good evening. My name is Anthu Huang. I am a resident of Northern Manhattan, and I'm an environmental justice advocate.
Thank you. Luz.
Hola, everyone. My name is Luz Claudio. I'm a professor of environmental medicine and public health at Mount Sinai School of Medicine here in New York. And my specialty is in the area of air pollution and asthma, especially in children. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Beryl Thurman.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Beryl Thurman. I'm the Executive Director and President of the North Shore Waterfront Conservancy of Staten Island.
Thank you. Tina.
I am unable to start my video, but I can speak. And my name is Tina Johnson. I'm an environmental activist from West Harlem.
And Eddie.
Sorry, working on this video. Hey, good evening, folks. I'm the Executive Director of the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance. My name is Eddie Bautista. It's a citywide coalition of community-based organizations from the city's most environmentally overburdened communities. And I am Brooklyn born and bred.
Thank you. And is there anyone that I've missed from the Environmental Justice Advisory Board? Well, okay. And I realized I did not introduce myself. I'm Peggy Shepard. I'm Executive Director of We Act for Environmental Justice based in Harlem and DC. And I am chair of the New York City Environmental Justice Advisory Board. And again, glad that you're all here tonight. Next slide. So we're now going to give an overview of the city's environmental justice laws. So we have a roadmap, and it's to assemble, assess, and address the key environmental justice concerns in New York City. And Local Law 60 requires a citywide study of environmental justice issues, which we've named the Environmental Justice for All report. And this report will be the main focus of our town hall this evening. Now, the Environmental Justice for All report will study the city's environmental justice areas. It will analyze environmental and climate issues, and it will identify which communities are being disproportionately impacted by environmental burdens and which ones are not seeing the benefits of green investments made by the city. The data gathered from the Environmental Justice Report will be used to create a public data portal and mapping tool. The portal will include data, maps, and other information, including facilities and infrastructure by address, by zip code, council district, community district, and by the type of environmental concern. Now, all of this work leads up to the creation of New York City's Environmental Justice Plan. City agencies must work with the advisory board to develop plans that will address environmental injustice in communities of color and low income in consultation with those impacted communities. The plan will identify initiatives for promoting environmental justice, and it will outline a set of discrete recommendations for how agencies should consider equity and environmental justice in their decision-making processes, in their program development, and in their policy making. This work is an ongoing commitment that will last into future administrations. The process of updating the study, the portal, and the plan must be repeated every 5 years. So again, we want to hold all administrations accountable and responsible. This plan must be repeated every 5 years. Now, what's the current status? We're in the process of developing the scope for the Environmental Justice Report, and that's why we're holding this town hall tonight, to solicit your input in developing that scope. Now, the scope of the report means that we need to talk about the topics that the report will focus on and the data that we will use for our analysis. Next slide. So in thinking about our environmental justice team, we have to understand that Local Law 64 established an Environmental Justice Advisory Board, most of whom you have met here tonight. It's comprised of external environmental justice leaders who are advocates, academics, public health experts, to really advise the city as the city implements these laws, and more importantly, to bring this work to New Yorkers, ensuring that the work is grounded in the real and lived experiences of New Yorkers living in the city's environmental justice communities. Next slide. In addition to the board, part of the environmental justice team is an interagency working group. It's made up of 19 different city agencies, not the MTA, which I just saw in the chat. The MTA is not a city agency. So it's made up of 19 city agencies that are responsible for delivering on the requirements of the environmental justice laws. Now, the work of both the board and the interagency working group will be coordinated by the Mayor's Office of Climate Policy and Programs, and Adriana Espinoza, who you met at the beginning, is the city's senior advisor for environmental justice. I am going to bring Adriana back again. She is now going to provide an overview of the environmental justice report's requirements. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Before I get started, hello everyone. As Peggy said, I'm Adriana Espinoza. I'm Senior Advisor for Environmental Justice. I'm happy to join you this evening. Before I get started, I do see that we were joined by another board member. So Shoshana, if you're able to please say hello, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Sure, thank you. What do I need to click, Adriana, to introduce myself? I
I can hear you.
Yes.
Just say hello and
Okay,
where you're
terrific.
coming
Okay,
from.
great. I'm Shoshana. I lead an organization called AIR NYC. We deploy community health workers into the homes of families struggling to manage chronic conditions. We've started in Harlem working on pediatric asthma, and we continue to work citywide to engage vulnerable people to break down the barriers of health. Thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you, Shoshana. So I'm going to try to go through my portion of this slideshow very slowly because we have interpretation happening in Spanish, in Mandarin, and in Cantonese. So if I have long pauses between my speaking, that is why. Thank you. So as Peggy said, the Environmental Justice Advisory Board, the Mayor's Office of Climate Policy and Programs, and the Interagency Working Group are all working on the first comprehensive report of environmental justice known as the Environmental Justice for All report. The Environmental Justice for All report will study the city's environmental justice areas and lay the foundation for the development of an environmental justice plan. The report, the environmental justice laws rather, include 10 requirements for this report. These requirements ensure that all major climate, environmental, and health concerns within the city's environmental justice areas are identified and measured, and also that city programs that address those issues are examined, and how we engage with environmental justice communities is also assessed. We want to hear your feedback on these requirements and any suggestions that you have for how to build upon them to make sure that the report fully reflects our city's environmental justice priorities. So I will go through those requirements here in a moment, but I'd like our audience please to keep in mind that we're looking for your input on how to build upon these requirements. So if you have suggestions for where we can go above and beyond these minimum requirements, please put those into the chat. We would love to hear from you. There will be also a discussion portion at the end of the event where we can talk to you. If you would like to give your input live, while we will not be able to hear from every attendee this evening, you could try to raise your hand, and if you would like to give your feedback live, and we may be able to take you on to be able to speak directly to myself and to the Environmental Justice Advisory Board. Another option for leaving your feedback is you can go to nyc.gov/EJstudy and leave your public comment there. We will have it linked into the chat, so that way you can click on it from there. You can also give us your input by emailing us at ej@climate.nyc.gov. So if you're joining us tonight from a phone and not from Zoom, and you want to ask a question or you want to give us feedback, you can send us an email at that email and we will get back to you. So before we get into the report's requirements, as I mentioned, the Environmental Justice for All report is a study of the city's EJ areas. So let's take a look at the city's EJ areas. The city's environmental justice laws define EJ areas as a low-income community or minority community located within the 5 boroughs of New York City. The specific definition is there on the slide for you. And defining environmental justice area in this way enables us to start from a baseline of social vulnerability in the environmental justice report. An environmental justice area is starting from a place of social vulnerability because it is a place that has been and continues to be more vulnerable to potential environmental injustices due to factors including a history of systemic racism inequitable resource distribution, and the environmental justice report is our way to identify, describe, and measure those specific environmental injustices. We created an interactive map that features an address lookup tool. I know that this map on the screen is probably pretty small and hard for you to see. We're going to drop into the chat a link to our map. If you are interested, you can click on that link and determine if you live in an environmental justice area or not. I also would like to just take a quick poll of the group, if I could. We're going to try to send a poll out just based on the map here. Do you live in an environmental justice area? Yes, no, or unsure? Just going to give a few moments, and while folks are filling that out, I want to note that there's a definition here that says potential environmental justice area. What this means is that the difference between the census data, which is what we use to develop this map, and the environmental justice area thresholds were not statistically significant. In other words, what that means is that we cannot be certain that these areas meet the income or race thresholds that you see on the screen in order to be considered an environmental justice area. However, the city will also seek to better understand potential environmental justice areas within the report. If we could go ahead and maybe close the poll, I'd love to see what folks said. Great, so it looks like 45% of you do live in an environmental justice area, 30% do not, 24% are unsure. Okay, let's move on. So the report is centered on assessing environmental outcomes. These environmental outcomes, also reviewing city programs and policies, and engaging communities. As a reminder, when I start going through these requirements, please send us in the chat how we can build upon these requirements. So for the first set of requirements, these are all of the requirements that relate to assessing environmental outcomes in the city. So we're required to outline the location and boundaries of the environmental justice areas of New York City. As you can see, we have already done so, and that was the map that we showed you on the previous slide. We also need to provide a description of environmental justice issues that may be affecting environmental justice areas. And specifically, what that means is we have to identify which communities within the city are experiencing each identified environmental justice issue. And we also we can recommend further data collection, research, or analysis that the city may need to do to better understand which location within the city is experiencing each issue and how we could be assessing it better. So I'm going to pause here on number 2 to say that a description of environmental justice issues, what that means is that the Environmental Justice Advisory Board, myself, and the Interagency Working Group are going to develop a list of environmental justice issues, and that is what's going to be covered in the report. If you have an idea for issues that are priorities for you or that you see in your community, please send that into the chat or send us a public comment at nyc.gov/EJ-study. So that way your priorities and your issues are centered in this report. Another requirement, moving on to number 3 of the report, is that the latest environmental data, including but not limited to things like air quality and water quality, also the location of and the characteristics of infrastructure owned and operated by the city, and violations of city environmental regulations must also be assessed and analyzed in the report, particularly if they are how they are impacting environmental justice areas. And finally, for this slide number 4, we are required to provide an estimate of the current federal, state, and local investment per capita in renewable energy in environmental justice areas compared to non-environmental justice areas. So what this means is we have to look at what the investment looks like in environmental justice areas in renewable energy and compare that to citywide or to other areas. If you have ideas for where to build upon these minimum requirements, please do so in the chat. Now, these requirements here are all related to city programs. So this is the city looking inward at ourselves and our programs to assess the extent to which city agencies hinder environmental justice or advance environmental justice. Specifically, number 5 here is we have to look at existing programs and activities that advance environmental justice and allow the public to participate in city agency decision-making. We also have to look at existing city programs, but also policies and processes and activities that may cause environmental justice concerns. So that means we're examining not just the program themselves, but the way that program was developed, the activities that city workers and folks in agencies developed that program, make decisions about that program. All of those things must be assessed to see how they may be contributing to environmental justice concerns.
Hi, Adriana and everybody. I would just encourage you to please use the Q&A button and not the chat. It's a lot easier for us to keep track of. Thank you.
Thank you. And on that note, a heads up, because I am speaking, I cannot see the chat right now, but I will, as soon as I'm done speaking, would love to see what everyone is saying. Okay, and then we also have to look at, excuse me. We also have to look at environmental justice programs that are proposed or being implemented in other municipalities or states within the United States. So that's another great thing for the Q&A. If you know of another environmental justice program that's happening in another state or in another city, we'd love to hear about it. Okay, so these final 3 requirements here all relate to how the city does public engagement in communities, specifically in environmental justice communities. The report, number 8, requires us to provide a description of barriers to meaningful participation in environmental decision-making that affects residents in environmental justice areas. As Peggy mentioned in the beginning, this work is about empowering communities to have a say in decisions about their own community. So this requirement is very important. And if you have thoughts and ideas about any of these, please send them our way. We also have to analyze existing city programs and processes that allow for public engagement and participation in decisions that are made by city agencies regarding siting, facilities, and infrastructure. What that means is regarding is decisions about where to put facilities and infrastructure. The decisions about which facilities and which infrastructure we consider in the report must be defined in our scope of study, which we're working on now. So if you have thoughts about what facilities and what infrastructure and what types of public engagement processes need to be examined, please send that information to us. And finally, we need to look at changes that could be made to existing city programs and policies to increase participation by people in environmental justice areas in decision-making that implicates environmental justice concerns. So this one is really tees us up for the environmental justice plan, because not only are we naming the programs and processes that are advancing or hindering environmental justice, we are also listing out changes that could be made to existing programs and policies to do better with our participation. So that is a tees us up for the plan, which is all about recommendations for how to do better. Again, we're seeking your input on these requirements and suggestions on where to build upon all of these requirements. But before we open the floor to hear your priorities and have their discussion, Tina, our board member, is going to give you a quick sense of what are some of the relevant issues that the city already tracks. Tina.
Oh, thanks, Adriana. Hi, I'm Tina Johnson again, and I am going to give you a brief overview of some of the key environmental justice issues that New York City currently tracks related to climate, health, and the environment. So together we'll review a small sampling of the different types of EJ currently tracked to give some sense of what information we can pull from the EJ report, pull in from the EJ report. And we will drop links to each of these portals and the information that we're going to be discussing in this section. So let's go on to the next slide, 18, and begin with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And they maintain a community health profiles. And that is data that is collected on social, economic, housing conditions, health outcomes at a neighborhood level. And it includes data visualizations, explanations, and neighborhood comparison points to understand how your neighborhood compares to the rest of the city as a whole. Another thing tracked by the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, well, maintained by them, they keep an environment and health data portal, which catalogs 200 plus environmental health indicators across 8 topics. So that includes outdoor air and weather, the built environment, pest and pesticides use, behavior and social factors, food and drink, remember the supersize me, environmental sustainability and health outcomes, as well as behavioral and social factors. And examples of the data displayed in the portal are blood lead levels, air quality levels, falls among older adults, asthma hospitalizations, cyclist hospitalizations, life expectancy, and more. Can we move on to the next slide? Slide 19. This slide talks about the Department of City Planning, which maintains a facilities database that contains data on 30,000 plus facilities and program sites that help shape the quality of life within neighborhoods. And all of this is available through an interactive web map. They also maintain a New York City flood hazard mapper, an interactive map of the city's coastal flooding hazards and how those hazards will increase with climate change. Next slide is for the Department of Parks and Recreation, and they have a Walk to the Park initiative, providing borough maps to show if you live within walking distance to a park. And they also maintain a street tree census, information about every tree in the city, including how much storm water it absorbs and the last time it was pruned. Next slide. The Mayor's Office of Economic Opportunity. That office produces an annual social indicator and equity report with information on economic, social, environmental, and physical health of residents, producing a large source of visual data resources, such as graphs, tables, and charts, to help you understand the information. And the last slide details the Mayor's Office of Environmental Remediation, and they have a speed mapping tool which provides the ability to search for information about environmental cleanup projects, cleanup requirements on rezoned land, petroleum spills, resiliency info, historic land uses, and community brownfield planning areas. So wrapping up our brief review of this sample of New York City data portals, I hope you now have a better sense of what data is currently being tracked and what is available to be pulled in the EJ report. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tina. So I am going to jump in now and break down the process of how to get involved, when, how's this going to happen. So I'm going to first say that this event that we're having right now, this town hall, we're doing because we want to make sure that everybody's voice gets a chance to be heard in this process. That this is something for those of us here on the town hall tonight who've been active in community fights for environmental justice. We know good and well what it feels like to get left at the end of the process and left out of the picture. So before anything, we want to make sure that you get a chance to comment on the things that are being discussed. So make sure that you leave your comments, that you leave questions in the Q&A, but that you leave comments on the scope itself, on the requirements, on the study that's being talked about, that you leave your comments on the website for the study. And the website is nyc.gov/EJ study. And the link has just been put into the chat. So make sure you copy that link and actually leave comments. It could be short, it could be in depth. You can write a report, drop in a dissertation, whatever you want, but make sure to leave comments. I'm gonna go to the next slide now. So what we want to lay out is what I'm going to lay out now is the process and the timeline. And so there were folks who asked what this process is going to look like, what feedback is going to look like. So this is the timeline, and this is the framing that we're using. So it is now February 2021. This is a process that is starting with a scope. The scope meaning the scope of what this study is going to look like, what this study is going to be. And the study itself is breaking down those three different areas that were addressed by Adriana. It's looking at the assessing the environmental outcomes, the review of the city programs and the policies, what's getting in the way. What are the things that the city is doing that are getting in the way of achieving environmental justice? What are the things that can actually be done to get to environmental justice? And it's also looking at what are ways that the city has been engaging in communities or not engaging in communities, and what can be done to create a better situation so that we all get to have a say. and its communities aren't left out of the picture. So those are the things that we are getting input on, that this event itself is created for. And this very first stage, if you look on this arrow on the screen, you see at the very far left, a February to April 2021. This is the stage that we're in right now. So this is a 3-month comment period on the scope, on the scope of the report. And by scope, I mean, what's the full range of responsibilities of this study? This study that is being worked on, this report, what are the things that are going to be included? What are the things that are not going to be included? So whatever you want to be included within or outside of those 3 areas that were talked about, then this is the time to lay that out. For many of you are maybe familiar, or I'm sure are familiar, and know that if you look at this arrow, oftentimes our communities are not included until the very end, the last piece of the process, which is commenting on the final plan, if we even get that. So what we're doing here is this is really broken up into 2 parts. So there's the study itself. So that's this February to April, and then moving into June on the report. So this is the study or the report on environmental justice conditions on the ground. And then the report will become and make way for an actual plan. And that plan is going to be, what is the city of New York going to do about it? So we're in the stage right now of putting together the report, this study of environmental conditions on the ground. And from there, then we move into the development of an actual plan. So we want to make sure that all of the issues that folks care about, things that people have talked about here, have raised as comments, and that you're going to be continuing to do. We have until April of, so 2 more months to really lay it all out. Once that is done, once that period for submitting your comments on the scope, on the different areas for this study, once that closes, then we move into the development of the actual scope, and everyone will have an opportunity to a 1 month, 30-day period to be able to comment on the draft report scope. Basically, this is going to be a draft of what the study is going to look at. And so this is the opportunity to then continue on that. From there, we actually move into the development of the report. And so the report will actually be compiled based on the framework of what we all say this report, this study is going to entail, what's going to be involved in here. So some of the things I just noted that I saw were, there were questions around the impact of closing down composting, climate resilience of transportation infrastructure, the impacts of e-commerce, and what are the impacts of warehouses. So those are all things that we want you to continue to drop in as things to look at. Someone else has suggested that the process of the study itself should include community data collection by members of the community. So those are all things that we want to make sure that you've put into this. So all of that goes into the report, the study. The study is done, and then we get feedback on the report itself. And so that will be another 3-month period moving into next year. So the draft report will be completed, and we'll have an opportunity to give comments and complete that by February of 2022. That gets us to the end of the report itself, or this study, the Environmental Justice for All study. And then we can move into actually getting solutions for environmental justice in New York City. So then we've got another period from July through September. So that's from the summer into the fall, another 3-month period. And so that's when it'll be an open call for suggestions from community residents, from people who are active and engaging in community organizing campaigns, advocates, wherever you are, to be able to propose solutions for environmental justice and solutions for the things that were raised in this report. And then from there, we move towards the final end of the arrow, which is the production of a draft EJ plan that then we can actually put out again and get comments on that draft. And once those comments for the draft are received, that's another 3-month period. Then it moves on to finalizing the plan. So all of that is to get us to a place where the things that are important to all of our communities, regardless of how much money you have, how white your community is, how, whether things that you're dealing with, that everybody gets a chance to be able to contribute to what the future of the city is going to look like and how we're going to ensure that environmental justice and climate justice are realities. So from there, I'm going to pass it over to Peggy Shepard to close. Before I do that, thank you. How to actually comment and how to contribute. There are a few ways to do it. One is to leave a comment. You can leave a comment on the website that I mentioned. That's the nyc.gov/EJ study. So that's one way. Second way is to send an email. So you can just send a simple email to ej@climate.nyc.gov. The third way, it was also mentioned by Adriana at the beginning, is to give a phone call. Just make a phone call. I'm pretty sure this is not going to the mayor's house, but this number will get you, this number is a place to leave comments for the environmental justice study. So any comments for this stage that we're in right now, this commenting on the scope, what are the requirements of the study, going beyond the minimum, these comments are to be submitted by April 30th. So we're in February right now. We've got 2 more months for you to be able to submit comments. So share with your community, share with your networks, put it out on social media, let others know, tag New York NYC Climate on Twitter to get the message out. So these are various ways you can put messages out on social media as well. But these ways of on the website, via email, voicemail message, these are the official ways that we're taking comments. And of course, all of the comments that you leave tonight in the chat, in the Q&A actually, and here verbally when you have the opportunity to make a comment. So we're more than likely not going to be able to get to everyone within the comment period, but we want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to be heard. So make sure that you use the ways that I mentioned to get your voice heard. With that, I'm now going to pass it back over to Peggy Shepard to close us out and take us into the final stage, which is the public comment period.
Okay, thank you, Omar. So we're here tonight to hear your voices. Please make your voice heard. This work is a priority for the administration, and it's in line with citywide efforts on racial justice and an equitable recovery from COVID-19. This report is only the beginning, and our work really begins with that plan. So again, we're happy to now open the floor for discussion. Next slide. And Adriana is going to moderate comments.
Thank you, Peggy, and thank you to all of the Environmental Justice Advisory Board members who contributed to that presentation. I know that it is a lot of information, so I did want to make it clear that the presentation, the recording of this event will be posted on our website and available for everyone. The presentation itself will also be translated into Spanish and into Chinese as well. So I want to start. I know there are a lot of Q&A and comments here. I want to start with a temperature check of folks who are on the line, and I'm going to do a poll. I want to know, which borough do you live in? So we're going to send around a poll. I'll leave that open for a moment, and a note to my board members that when we're going through the discussion process, if you'd like to please turn your video back on. so that way our attendees know which board members are present and that all of us can be available to have this discussion. Let's go ahead and close the which borough do you live in poll. See what we got. All right, so we see Manhattan is represented here tonight, 32%, 28% from Brooklyn, 11% from the Bronx, 20% from Queens, 3% from Staten Island, and 11% outside of the city. So we have to do better with Staten Island and with the Bronx, don't we, guys? All right, so thank you so much for that poll. So I wanted to start by addressing what I'm seeing in a lot in the Q&A is, I'm seeing, will water quality be addressed? Will e-commerce be addressed? Will truck traffic be addressed? So those decisions are going to be made by the interagency working group as they are developing the scope, but it is the board and it is the public that holds us accountable for making sure your priorities are considered. So if you want water quality to be part of this, truck traffic, e-commerce, that's what your comments are for. We want to make sure that they are all considered and that it's not just myself and the interagency working group making the decisions. It is all of us, and it is the board holding us accountable. I'm going to do another poll here. This poll is similar to what's on the website at nyc.gov/EJ-study. I just want to see what are the top environmental issues or climate concerns that are facing your neighborhood. While we're waiting for folks to respond to that, if there are any board members on who have had a chance to check through the chat or the Q&A who want to make a comment about what folks are saying, you're all welcome to do so.
Yes, Adriana, thank you. This is Luz. I just wanted to say what amazing questions we're getting through the Q&A. I don't know if you had a chance to look through, but I know that some of the board members here can answer some of the questions that have been coming through. So I've been going through some of them and trying to answer the ones that I have some expertise in. But if anybody else can respond to some of these, I think it would be helpful because we have 90 questions right now.
Yes, there's a lot of them, and we're going to get to as many of them as possible. One that I'm seeing here is what role can and will youth play in contributing to the advisory board's decision-making process? Is there a place for youth on the board or another way for them to be part of the decision-making process? Are there any board members who want to tackle that one? If not, I can jump in.
We're certainly, they can participate by during the comment period. But I really would like, having a 13-year-old myself, who's very interested in these issues. I think there might be a really different perspective that youth could give to the board. I'm not exactly sure what the criteria are to getting people on the board, but I think it would expand our horizons if we included youth in this board as well. So maybe Adriana, you can answer about what criteria maybe we want to have a group of youth from schools be represented here as a board members or something like that. That could be very wonderful to have.
Sure. So I will first, let's see what our results here. It looks pretty split on the key issues. Seems like garbage is a big one, including illegal dumping. 41% said that's your biggest issue in your neighborhood. Any reactions to these from the board? Any of these stand out to you?
Adriana, can I just address the issue about youth participation?
Yes, please.
So I had a couple of ideas about that, and I thank you. Thanks to the commenter for raising that issue, and I think that that's a very important role and voice in the process. So one of the things that I was thinking about is, as parents, we can encourage our children to participate in the survey process, because I filled one out today, and it seems like it's pretty easy to do, and the questions are certainly not outside of the ken of what children or even younger adults would consider and see in their environment. So I think as we parents fill out the survey, we should encourage our children to do it with us. The other thing is, if there are teachers or counselors or folks who work with youth in the audience today, I would encourage you to also perhaps make it a class exercise or extra credit or something like that to encourage your students and the youth that you work with to participate in the process, because I definitely think that's a valuable voice in this.
I just wanted to add something as well, as someone involved in the community-based organization universe and part of multiple networks. We're going to continue to try to elevate this and share with partners, community-based organizations that specifically address the needs of young people and work directly with young people. And I think we'll do another push each time to be more deliberate about that kind of outreach to make sure we incorporate the voices of young people.
I agree. I think that the voices of the youth are critical in this process. Environmental justice at its core speaks to principles of intergenerational equity. And as we are right now in the decision-making seat, and decades from now, the young people who submit answers to this survey will be experiencing the environmental decision-making that we have made and living with the consequences. I think if we could probably work with the Department of Education to create maybe a survey that would be easier to answer by youth, maybe, asking, maybe differentiating some of the answers a little bit, that could be something to package for younger people. And we could even maybe liaise with, I think there's a current climate program for young people through the Department of Education. I think that would be a great place to start. But hopefully many young people will participate. That's the goal.
Thank you, Christine. I appreciate that. And thank you to all the board members who contributed to that. I wanted to point out that if you go to our public comment website, nyc.gov/EJ the very last question is, do you know folks that need to be involved in this process, or community-based organizations that need to be involved? That is one way that we can make sure that we're reaching our youth. If you are part of a youth group, or you have an environmental club in your school and you want to be involved, send us that information there so we can make sure that we're doing the work to reach the younger generation. And speaking of that website, I wanted to do another quick poll and ask if you've already left a public comment on our website. Interested to see who's already done that. And then we also want to, while folks are filling that out, we do want to start taking some folks on to be live speakers to give them a chance to give a comment. So reminder, if you would like to speak live on camera to the panelists, you need to both raise your hand and send us a chat. So that way we can see your name pop up and we know who to take you live. So please bear with us as we figure out that process. All right, let's go ahead and close this poll. No, okay, great. So, well, you're here, so that's the first step, and you know about it. So that's the second step. And I look forward to all of you hopefully leaving a public comment. Remember that you could go to the website. You can also leave us a voicemail, or you can send us an email. All of those are an option. I do see that maybe we have an opportunity to bring someone live now named Corinne. Are we able to bring Corinne on to make her comment?
Hi, thank you so much for the opportunity to share my comment. I feel very strongly that our organics waste program is a perfect symbol of how we failed in an environmental justice approach, given that the brown bin program was not offered throughout the 5 boroughs equally. It was only put in certain neighborhoods. When COVID happened, we eliminated that program and are now sending 300,000 pounds of food waste more to our transfer facilities, which are primarily located in the South Bronx. We have a higher concentration of trucks that are increasing the air pollution in that area, kind of exacerbating the issue, not to mention the methane gas that is being produced from that waste being sent to landfills. So I just want to know, is part of the work being done to better assess the overlapping negative effects of removing organic waste, both from a community level and an environmental level?
Thank you, Corinne. I will kick it off with a response, and then if any board members wanted to chime in, I know that many of you work on this issue, so please chime in. First, to answer the question about will this be considered? So back in the requirements, we are required to consider the ways in which city programs advance or hinder environmental justice. So your description of the organics program and it not reaching every community, that's on the table for consideration in the environmental justice for all report. And so thank you so much for raising that. And then the second part of your question is now escaping me. I'm so sorry, Corinne. Also related to organics. Do any board members want to chime in? I'm so sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
Well, I'll jump in with something here. The issue of organics collection, I don't think anybody's going to get any disagreement from anyone here that organics collection is something that is not necessary. Composting is something that isn't necessary. That's something that we live by, and we want to see more of. And I'm sure that there are lots of things that people have on their mind that they want to bring up and you want to stress. And this is the time to do it, to really put it out there. So I'd say don't even ask us if something's going to be considered. Just tell us, lay it out there so that it's going to be considered. And there was someone who left in the Q&A what I think is a great suggestion as a matter of process. And the question was, what's the transparency going to be for making the decisions about what actually gets included in the plan, what actually gets included within the scope of the scope of the report itself, what actually gets included in the study. And I think that that's a great question about transparency and a question about process. And I think, just on that point, that for us as the board, something I want to see is actually laying of that out. And there was a suggestion about the interagency working group, in this case, since it's the interagency working group that's putting together the plan, to detail its rationale for inclusion of whatever the final scope is going to be and whatever the final plan is. So that is a great suggestion for contributing to transparency in this process.
Yes, thank you. And I will provide a response to that. And also, Corinne, for the second half of your question is whether we would address the negative impacts of removing the organics program onto the city. That is not something that is explicitly listed in the requirements. If you would like us to consider that, please leave us a comment and we will consider it. And now to answer Omar's question about transparency in the process. So the board here with you all today is a critical part of maintaining accountability and transparency for this process. And They are here to elevate your issues. They have access to every single public comment that is left through our website. They will have access to the public comments that are left through the email and that are left through the voicemail. And any suggestion or formal comment that comes from an advisory board member. So if they are elevating your issues and they're saying, hey, we need to look at the negative impacts of removing organics on environmental justice areas in the city. If they submit that as a comment, myself and the interagency working group must respond to that. We must post it publicly, and we must provide an explanation for why it was included or not included. So that it will be transparency in the decision making. And so that's why the board is going to you now to get your input so that they can elevate your priorities and make sure that they are seen and responded to by the city. I see Domingo here today. Hi, Domingo, how you doing? You want to add something?
I'm doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining.
I'm doing well. So I just like looking at the survey, I noticed that there was nothing about like composting or organic waste reduction. I don't know if you grouped it in with waste or that's how you were thinking about going for this. But I really think composting should have its own lane because that's the easiest way for us to be sustainable in New York City. And it's also an easy way to provide economic wealth to those underserved neighborhoods by building more compost sites, creating more drop-offs, and creating jobs in the process. So I feel like, you know, especially NYCHA, New York City Housing Authority, didn't get anything from the compost project aside from a few drop-offs and a few events. And they were really just left in the dark. We need to fix that going ahead. All of this money that's going to city agencies, we have to ensure that all of New York City is benefiting off of it and not just those popular places that these nonprofits like to work in. Yeah, so that being said, just focusing on composting, creating jobs for the NYCHA community and those underserved communities. And also like we need more representation from the Bronx. It's the poorest county. I don't think there's enough people from the Bronx on this town hall right now. Yeah.
Here. Thank you, Domingo. Appreciate that. And I think you're right. I saw that there was not much representation from the Bronx and also Staten Island, so we'll do better with that. I want to bring on Roxanne now, who's going to join us and make a comment. Roxanne, are you there?
Yes, hi. Yes, hi. My name is Roxanne Delgado. I'm a Bronx resident, also an organizer for Friends of Pelham Parkway. We're a Friends of Park group. I'd like to thank you for this town hall meeting. It's so much needed. And I'd like you to address, include in your scope, the Parks Agency, their lack of public engagement when it comes to tree care and tree planting plans. It tends to be often where parks tends to care for the trees in much higher income areas where there's homeowners or areas where it's less diverse. And we need the trees, especially in Pelham Parkway, because we're in the middle of a main street and a service area where there's lots of pollution. And we don't have the trees to absorb that pollution, as well as we don't have the shade to provide some relief to our residents and our younger generations. And unfortunately, the decisions our park is making currently is going to have a dire consequences for our next generations, which is why we're trying to do rallies, because last year, and I'll make this short, we held rallies in less than a week. We gathered 200 signatures. We had press conferences. We had over 25 people, including kids attending. And the only communication we received from parks was through their press communication to the in response to our coverage. Unfortunately, parks are going to proceed with their tree planting plan, which would deprive this area, which is NYCHA, immigrants, the working poor, of the trees that we're entitled to, because those trees were initially removed from this section, but we replanted in the areas that are more higher income, less diverse, and homeowners. So I definitely look forward to working with this committee, and I hope you look into the scope. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Roxanne. I appreciate you. Thanks for joining us. I wanted to remind folks that if you want to join us to come live and give your comment, you need to send us a chat and raise your hand. So that way we know that you're trying to speak to us, and then our tech support will help you bring you on to the chat. So while we wait for other folks to raise your hand and to ask to join us, I'm going to do another poll. We're going to switch a little bit, talk about climate hazards. So the poll is, what climate hazards do you feel like in your neighborhood is least equipped to handle? So what do you feel like your neighborhood is not prepared to handle that you have experienced? Does any board members, while we're waiting for people to fill out this poll, any board members want to answer the question for themselves about their own neighborhoods?
I was thinking about power outages, especially in light of what we saw happen in Texas. That is obviously one of the major, and that I think John Macbeth also added that, but it's a significant issue, especially around extreme events.
I would like to add that we have torrential downpours in Staten Island, and unfortunately our storm water system is not equipped to handle it. So we have flooding on streets, especially streets that are downhill. So that is an issue. And we also have coastal flooding on the North Shore as well of Staten Island, to which we also have shoreline erosion, which has not been addressed. So flooding from torrential rainstorms, as well as sea level rise, storm surges, and flooding, even when it's not a hurricane, is an issue for the North Shore of Staten Island, which is an environmental justice community.
I'd also like to speak in support of Ms. Dermott's comment. In Southeast Queens as well, flooding from stormwater and flooding has been a serious problem throughout that area. And that would be something that I would definitely lift up.
I'll add, because I hadn't heard it yet. I'm in the Bronx, and definitely heat. You know, from we've got lots of buildings just in my community, mostly apartment buildings, older apartment buildings, and folks don't have air conditioning, especially elders in the community who are especially susceptible to heat. Yeah. I've also seen I've seen a bunch of folks mentioning that they've raised their hand that are waiting to be called on. Adriana.
Yes, we now have a few people queued up. I believe Chris is next. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hi, good evening, everybody.
Hi, Chris.
So one, thank you for doing this. A friend pinged me and I jumped in. My name is Christopher LeBron. I'm a lifer from Hell's Kitchen. And I'm also a member of my community board 4, and I'm on the environmental committee there. I'm just speaking as a private citizen right now, but I would love to have the mayor's office come and talk to our committee. We rarely get visited by the mayor's office, and this is incredibly important for a myriad of reasons. One being is that Hell's Kitchen has the 3rd most polluted air in all of Manhattan. And then the following points tie into that. We're going to have 3 capital projects with the city and state, which is the new Port Authority. We also have the new tunnel to support the Lincoln Tunnel from New York to New Jersey. And then we'll also have the governor's expansion of Penn Station to the south of Madison Square Garden. In addition to capital projects from city and state, we're going to have 2 private ongoing urban projects. One is the development of Hudson Yards West upon the completion of Hudson Yards East. And the second is the Hudson River waterfront that goes from 34th Street up to 59th Street, where Hudson River Boulevard ends. Additionally, per capita, we actually have the least amount of park space in all of New York City, and that's according to federal guidelines of suggested park space for urban populations. So, you know, over the next 10, 15 years, we're going to be struggling with CO2 from construction. We're going to be struggling with CO2 from continued traffic, as 9th Avenue, 10th Avenue, and 8th Avenue are on off ramps, and for the Lincoln Tunnel and Port Authority. And we really would appreciate your presence there. Like I said, I'm a lifer in Hell's Kitchen. I'm asthmatic, along with the rest of my Puerto Rican family members. We were not born with asthma, we developed it. And so this environmental justice forum and public review process would be greatly appreciated here.
Thanks for your time, Chris. I appreciate you. If you want to email ej@climate.nyc.gov. You said Community Board 4 in Manhattan. I'd be happy
Yes,
to set up a talk to you guys. So shoot me an email
sure.
there and we can set something up.
Let's repeat that again. ej@climate.
Dot .nyc.
Thank you.
.gov.
.gov. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate it very much, Adriana.
And I saw,
Thank you, Chris.
I think that's Jessica from Nos Quedamos dropped a comment here saying that info sessions to community boards is a great point. So extending that beyond one community board to actually all our community boards and environmental justice communities.
Yes, good point. So before this town hall, the information about the public comment period and the town hall was sent out to every community board in the city. Some of them have started to get back to us. I have a meeting set up to speak with Bronx Community Board 8, but I welcome the opportunity to speak to as many community boards as possible. So please hit me up and we can talk. I'm gonna go over now to Shino.
Good evening. Thank you so much. It's so nice to see some of you on the advisory board. It's been a while. It's great to see you, Pearl. Hi. So I have been working on clean water issues for quite some time, and the city agency in charge of clean water programs have done public engagement, and there is a process for public to be involved in the planning process, but it's woefully inadequate. And I would really love to see a robust, authentic public engagement process for every city-led projects and programs and planning efforts that actually is culturally relevant. A lot of times these processes really is dominated by white people, affluent, very well educated, and then DEP brings in engineers. Didn't mean to blur the city agency name, sorry. The city agency brings in engineers and the presentation becomes really wonky and really technical, and it becomes a space that is not welcoming to a lot of members of the community who really should be there and whose voices we should be listening to. So to the extent possible, I would love it if the advisory committee can reimagine and rethink how city agencies do public outreach and engagement and make it an authentic process that really centers the voice of the people who have been historically marginalized in this city. I think that would be a great improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Shino. That's a really great point. I'm happy that you brought it up. And I wanted to ask a question to all of our attendees who are here today. And if you could answer it in the Q&A or in the chat, my question for you is, how do you think the city can do a better job of involving you and your neighbors in decisions about your own neighborhood? Love to hear your comments there. So while those are happening, Emily, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting this together. This is really important. So recently, there's been a lot going on with Big Reuse's composting site and arguments as to whether it should or shouldn't stay where it is. And one of the biggest missing links in this conversation is real robust comment from Queensbridge houses. So, which is right next to the composting site. And so I spoke with some organizers from Environmental Justice for All. And basically what they're saying is, like, people in that facility are so focused on just getting their basic needs met right now that they just don't have the capacity to organize and comment on this. And so, I don't know what the answer is for making things more accessible or, more of a priority, because I think it's just very complex. And, for some NYCHA housing developments, like, they're battling with like regular water shutoffs or or power outages. And so like just getting that comment is important. And I also wanted to mention, in terms of water, I think that looking at ewg.org/tap water, anybody can plug in their zip code and find out the quality of your tap water. Because I think that just knowing the quality of your water and based on where you are, like that study has already been pretty extensive. And I think that using that tool would be really helpful.
Thank you, Emily. I would love to respond to that. I want to pause for a moment to see if any board members would like to, particularly we have a NYCHA rep from the board that wants to maybe say anything.
Yes, I do. I think she makes a really good point, and I'm in total agreement with it. But I just, she asked a question kind of rhetorically that I'd like to try to answer. And the answer is that the little things that whomever was telling you that NYCHA tenants can't concentrate on because they're concerned, you know, like with the basics are directly related to compost, are directly related to waste, and are directly related to the things we're looking at. And myself as a NYCHA tenant am looking to this process to be able to open up a different conversation that isn't stuck in the repair zone, and that is forward looking and not backwards looking, because it's one thing to try to get everything up to date, but then what? You know, like the whole world is trying to get up to date and the whole world is facing this existential crisis, and NYCHA isn't on the sideline. So I would encourage anyone that lives in NYCHA or knows people that live in NYCHA to get involved in this process, and, you know, like to have them really think about what they're going through and what kind of solutions that they can propose to the city to change the isolation of NYCHA tenants, and to insert them in the questions, in these big questions that we're all dealing with. It's true, NYCHA is a hardship case, but it's not off the earth. It's not outside of humanity. And it's really a part of the process. And maybe if the NYCHA tenants were engaged differently, they might want to get involved in the composting. They might want to make some of that good green money with good green new skills. And so I'd like to just encourage that opening. If you have that opening and you have those relationships, to encourage them to get involved. Thank you.
Could I also just add one thing as somebody who lives pretty much adjacent to Queensbridge, and that is that there are some really fierce advocates there who are doing powerful work around composting at NYCHA. They've been fighting for the sacred garden. They've been fighting hard for exactly this kind of stuff. I mean, it's not that they're not engaged in this, it's that they're hitting brick walls of people not listening to their words. And I think the prior commenter talking about how to make these comment periods into something real, where people organize and speak and then are heard because people are listening, that is an incredibly important thing. But there are plenty of people at Queensbridge who are organizing every day around this issue and a whole bunch of other issues.
Thank you, Rebecca. And we are low on time. I want to try to see if we can get to more of you. I did want to mention just, you know, I guess the elephant on the Zoom is that if we were in a different time and place, I would love to be doing this with you in person. I'm sure all of the board members would be love to doing this with you in person. And, you know, hopefully for future events, we will be able to do so after we get past this global pandemic. I did want to do A quick check of the Q&A. I see Daphne, thank you for joining. Daphne asked, will we consider redlined and Superfund sites? And so the report does require a look back at environmental justice areas and why they are environmental justice areas. And what we know here within everyone, I would say on the board, recognizes that it's systemic racism, segregation, redlining, and lots of other systemic inequality that persists today that created the sacrifice zones and the environmental justice areas that we have today. And so that will definitely be called out in the report. In your question about Superfund sites, yes, we are not limited to only looking at New York City data. That's what we have available, easily accessible to us because we have 19 city agencies working on this. But we can also use environmental data from the state and from the federal level, including Superfund sites and proximity to Superfund sites. So thank you for your question, Daphne. Did we have anyone else queued up? If we want to give one last comment before closing, I lost track of the chat. Sylvie, hi Sylvie, go ahead. You're on mute.
I did not prepare really a presentation for tonight anyway, you don't have any time, and I contributed to the chat and the Q&A. I'm really very happy to have learned about this initiative. I just learned about it last night. For Harlem and the Greater Harlem Coalition, it's a great opportunity to frame environmental justice also in terms of health equity, in terms of quality of life and degradation of communities by a large industry that is totally geared towards the opioid crisis, but it's a large business that abuse deregulations in terms of zoning and land use, as well as the lack of obligation given to the license obtained from a state agency. So a lot of issues combined. We have been able to use some tools, mapping tools showing the overconcentration of so-called community facilities that are actually opioid treatment centers, a methadone clinic to say it bluntly. And we really see that this has been able to happen, I think, because Harlem is not considered Manhattan core. It's considered an outlier district that suddenly falls, and the regulation are not applied the same. So the respect of community and the character of neighborhoods is not respected. There is no accountability by these large providers that are located totally chaotic, in a chaotic manner. They are over-concentrated. I mean, I just don't want to repeat, but the point is that we like data to advocate for changes in the way decisions are made about licensing, about the obligations given to licensees, and the voice of the community at the table. Because, well, I've lived in Harlem now for 24 years. I joined the coalition recently, but it is obvious that Harlem is not well represented where it counts in the City Planning Commission in different areas that are really affecting its future. And it's not just, it's the detrimental effect of infrastructure on noise, safety, etc. I mean, you get the picture, crime, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvie. So if I can try to distill, I think what you're saying is that it's not just the city infrastructure and city actions, but we have to look at how private businesses are abusing their contracts and their licenses and contributing to environmental injustice.
Yes, and
thank you so much.
They are not considered businesses. They are considered community facilities, and they don't fall under the limitations given to businesses. So there are a lot of flaws in the laws and in the governance issues. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sylvie. So we are over time. If any board members want to give a response to Sylvie, I'm happy to have you take the floor. If not, I'm happy to also close us out since we are over time. Okay. Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining us and for providing your comments in the chat in the Q&A. I wanted to remind you that you have until April 30th to help us shape the scope of the Environmental Justice for All report. So you can go to nyc.gov/EJ study to leave your comment there. We'll also, again, be putting out the recording and the materials from this town hall. With that, that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to my board members.